The Draco Empire boasted heavy thermal weaponry capable of melting glass, so Fleet Admiral Zorus naturally assumed the weather wouldn't pose any tactical hindrance. His invasion force dropped into the North American quadrant, known as Massachusetts, in late January. Planetary scans had shown nothing but dense forests, winding asphalt, and scattered human settlements, but the scanners completely failed to calculate the arrival of a Category 4 nor'easter. The temperature wasn't just dropping, it was actively murdering the very concept of heat. Gale force winds shrieked at 70 miles per hour, turning the blinding snow into a horizontal barrage of white shrapnel. A Draco scout walker touched down on Route 9, its hydraulic mechanical legs locking dead onto the black ice. The pilot engaged the external loudspeakers. "Citizens of this sector, your frozen world now belongs to." The broadcast was violently cut short. Cutting through the blinding whiteout, two dinner plate-sized headlights pierced the gloom, accompanied by the deafening roar of a V8 diesel engine. That was Sully. Sully had been driving a snowplow on Route 9 for 22 damn years. He was running on 3 hours of sleep, and despite it being 4 degrees Fahrenheit outside, he was clutching an extra-large iced coffee from Dunkin and had zero tolerance for anything in his way. The 9-ton municipal heavy snowplow slammed into the alien mech at 40 miles an hour. In an explosion of sparks and flying slush, Sully's plow launched the walker clean off the road and straight into a frozen cranberry bog. Sully spat out a mouthful of crushed ice deadpan, cranked the steering wheel hard left with one hand, and slammed the shifter into reverse with the other. The muffled roar of the V8 overpowered the 70-mile-an-hour wind screaming outside. The 9-ton beast of a plow backed up steadily along the iced-over asphalt. Angling his massive steel blade, Sully shoved the 12 tons of snow had been accumulating on the shoulder all night right over the lip of the cranberry bog. The churning wave of snow cascaded down the icy embankment, instantly swallowing the half of the mech's cockpit still sticking out of the ice, its snapped hydraulic legs, and the severed energy lines that were still sizzling and smoking. In less than 10 seconds, a waist-high fresh snowdrift had formed, burying the entire scout walker without a trace. Sully slammed on the brakes, tilted his head to stare at the snowbank for 2 seconds, and took another pull of his bone-chilling iced coffee, satisfied the snow route was finally clear. He grabbed the CB radio and barked at the dispatch center. "Route 9 midsection is clear. Just scrape some busted-ass billboard off the road." He threw it back into drive, ready to keep plowing. At that exact moment, 300 kilometers above, in the bridge of the Draco orbital command ship, a warm yellow tactical hologram was tracking the invasion force's coordinates. Admiral Zorus had just raised his perfectly temperature-controlled energy drink when his claw suddenly froze over the console. The green blip representing the Vanguard scout walker had just instantly flatlined at the Route 9 coordinates. A low, guttural rumble resonated in Zorus's throat, his scales standing on end like hardened spikes out of sheer fury. He had reigned over interstellar conquests for 30 years, and he had never seen a Draco scout walker quietly vanish on the primitive backroads of a backwater planet. The walker's bio-armor could tank 100mm armor-piercing rounds, and its thermal shielding could melt half a ton of solid steel. How in the galaxy could a bunch of Earthlings, barely out of the gasoline Stone Age, pull that off? The comms officer's claws trembled as he pulled up the jam-heavy coordinates. He confirmed it was indeed the New England Route 9 sector, currently flagged with a Category 4 blizzard. Every probe signal was being shredded by the howling snowstorm. Zero surface details could be read. Zorus slammed his claw down on the command console, spilling half his energy drink across the panel. A swarm of primitive insects cannot overturn the natural order. His synthesized voice dripped with deep-seated arrogance, a fanatic belief that thermal weaponry was the absolute master of the cosmos. Deploy 2 scout walkers and 50 heavy infantrymen. Immediate low-orbit drop. Establish a blockade on Route 9. I want that sector turned upside down. Find whatever scrap metal weapon they're hiding. I want it mounted on this bridge as a trophy. Green lights flared across the command room's systems. 4 sealed drop pods detached from the orbital ship's hardpoints, trailing blue hot streaks of exhaust as they plunged toward the atmosphere. The dense blizzard clouds instantly swallowed the light from the pods. Friction roasted the pod hulls red hot as the altimeter plummeted. 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. The pod door unlock countdown began to tick. In 10 seconds, the entire Draco strike force would touch down on the black ice of Route 9. Admiral Zorus stood riveted to the orbital command ship's tactical hologram, his knuckles pressing so hard the console's thermal coating began to heat up. He watched the 4 green blips of the drop pods punch through the blizzards, static and slam violently into the permafrost of Massachusetts Route 9. On the final tick of the countdown, the hum of the unlocking doors filtered into his earpiece through the encrypted comms, and the tactical signals of 50 Draco heavy infantrymen blinked online in unison. The first infantryman stepped out of the pod and, following protocol, raised his rifle, finger squeezing the trigger of the plasma weapon. Nothing happened. The -15-degree, 70-mile-an-hour wind howled through the open heat vents, ruthlessly sucking away every ounce of residual thermal energy in the chamber. A half-inch thick layer of solid ice instantly locked up the firing pin and the feeding mechanism. The entire gun turned into a 20-pound chunk of dead iron. The comms channel instantly exploded. Number 2's rifle jammed. Number 3's jammed. All 50 plasma rifles were entirely frozen solid within 30 seconds of making landfall. Zorus' brow fiercely knitted together. He swiped his hand to magnify the hologram, unable to believe his own eyes. His proud thermal weapon-based empire had just been neutralized by an earthly blizzard. On the screen, the Draco heavy infantrymen wearing sleek, treadless bio-armor boots were wobbling wildly on a highway coated in mirror-smooth black ice. Every single one of them was clutching a completely useless piece of scrap iron. Gale force winds whipped sheets of snow against their armor, sending the entire squad staggering relentlessly. Visibility was suppressed to under 10 yards. Nobody noticed the faint, warm glow of a cigarette cherry burning in the shadows of the woods just off the road, coming from an inconspicuous hunting cabin. The lenses of 3 pairs of binoculars were trained squarely on the highway, throwing a quick reflection into the storm. Hunter the woodsman leaned against the windowsill, a lit cigarette dangling from his lips. He mumbled around the filter, "Pony up, boys. Quit dragging your feet." The redneck on the left, wearing a camo jacket, slapped a crumpled $5 onto the pine table. Inputting down 3 seconds. "Ain't no way these sumbitches got any tread on them fancy boots. Standing on black ice? Yeah, right." The lumberjack on the right fished out a tenner, rubbed his thumb over it, and grinned. "I'll give 'em 8 seconds. Look at 'em, big boys. Low center of gravity. They'll do a couple more pirouettes." Hunter flicked his ashes, pulled out a neatly rolled $20 bill, and slapped it on the pile, his knuckles rapping the wood. "I bet these dumbasses don't even make it to the first big gust." The 3 men stifled their laughter, eyes glued to the highway. The 50 Draco heavy infantrymen were flailing around their frozen solid plasma rifles. Their comms were nothing but static. A few brave ones tried to take a step toward the tree line. With the smooth soles of their boots hitting the mirror like black ice, every single step required them to throw their arms out and windmill wildly just to keep their balance. The wind was getting nastier. A howling roar rolled down from the tops of the pines, and a visible wall of whiteout snow spray swept horizontally across the road, instantly engulfing the entire Draco squad in a 5-meter visibility soup. The 3 men gripped their binoculars, holding their breath, unblinking as they watched the first 10 infantrymen step out of the drop pod's shadows. They had just shifted their weight to their front feet. A 70-mile-an-hour gust of wind, packed with ice shards, absolutely broadsided Route 9. The hologram signal instantly blew out into a wall of ear-piercing static. 10 red dots simultaneously flipped over and pinned themselves to the black ice, never to move again. Agonizing wails squeezed through the encrypted comms onto the bridge. The bio-armor had zero slip-resistant texturing. The black ice was as slick as the carrier lubricants in the Empire's capital, and the sheer weight of their heavy armor multiplied the impact of their falls by 3. All their legs were shattered. Ice shards were packing into the seams of their armor, and their core temps were dropping faster than a stalled energy reactor. The remaining 40 infantrymen huddled in the shadows of the drop pods, lacking the courage to take a single step forward. The hydraulic joints of the 2 scout walkers were already caked in half a centimeter of ice, emitting a horrifying metallic screech with every movement, on the verge of totally seizing up. Zorus smashed his scaly claw against the hologram, sending ripples through the half-empty energy drink on the table. He roared out orders for the remaining troops to advance and establish a perimeter. Even if their plasma rifles were dead weight, they had to hold Route 9 and sever the humans' reinforcement line. Before his roar even faded, 120 miles away at the MassDOT dispatch center, the red warning light indicating a massive roadblock on Route 9 just finished its system check and flared to life. It cast a bloody red glare over veteran dispatcher Bill's coffee-stained desk. Bill, who had just finished gnawing on some cold ham, was dozing off with a cigarette in his mouth. The alarm startled him so bad he twitched, dropping the burning cherry straight into his crotch. Swearing up a storm, he swatted at his thighs and lunged at the monitor. Massachusetts Route 9, Sector K47. Roadblock sensors were all deep red. This was the second alarm trigger in 2 hours. Which dumb son of a bitch is parking junk in the middle of the road during a nor'easter? Sully just cleared the upper stretch, and we got another jam. Bill slammed a hand on the dispatch console and pulled up the nearest work order. 3 heavy-duty salt trucks, loaded to the brim with industrial road salt, had just finished wrapping their tires in snow chains at a maintenance yard 20 miles out, waiting for deployment. The walkie-talkie crackled and spat out the dispatchers swearing. The 3 municipal drivers, who had been huddled around a thermos cursing the blizzard, grabbed their keys and headed out. Lead driver Old Joe shoved his half-finished extra-large Dunkin iced coffee into his door cup holder, turned the key, and fired up the 12-ton diesel engine. The rumble instantly drowned out the sound of the blizzard hammering the garage doors. The 3 salt trucks backed out of the bay one by one, their chained tires crunching loudly over the black ice, their massive chassis splitting the hubcap deep snow. The beds were packed with an industrial salt mix that rattled like coarse sand over every bump. The highly concentrated, harsh, salty stench drifted out of the truck beds, mixing into the bone-chilling gale. With visibility under 20 feet, the 3 trucks flipped on their high beams lined up in a convoy and rolled straight down Route 9 toward the roadblock. The wind whipped the snow, pasting it across the windshields. 3 murky yellow halos crept closer and closer through the whiteout mist. They were less than a mile out from the Draco Empire's ground blockade. The surface wind hit like bullets of ice. 40 Draco heavy infantrymen were packed tightly in the shadows of the 2 scout walkers. A half-inch crust of ice had already formed over the seams of their bio-armor. Every single one of them was up on their toes, desperately trying to find traction on the slick black ice. Every 10 seconds, someone would slip, wildly grabbing onto a comrade's armor to avoid eating the pavement. Their plasma rifles were long frozen into useless paperweights, now just slung over their shoulders for decoration. The breathing behind their faceplates sounded like heavy bellows. Their body heat was leaking steadily through their armor seams into the -15-degree wind. The pilot of the left scout walker screamed into his comms, his knuckles turning stark white as he wrenched the weapon's firing lever. The laser cannon's power lines had been snap-frozen into solid columns of ice. The joystick was jammed halfway. The weapon system's warning lights blazed a blinding red. Not a single laser pulse could fire. The right mech's attempts yielded the exact same result, ending only with an agonizing, brittle crunch of ice from its joints. The entire chassis shuddered, then seized completely, unable to move another inch. The muffled thunder of engines rolled over the blizzard, getting louder, vibrating the ice right out from under the Draco infantry's feet. Those three halos of light finally breached the last snowy bend. The massive silhouettes of heavy trucks materialized out of the snow fog. The white paint of MassDOT on the front grills gleamed blindingly in the yellowish headlights. They showed zero intention of slowing down, hurtling straight toward the blockade. Salt Truck 1's windshield wipers were swinging frantically, still unable to clear the 70 miles per hour snow slurry, smashing the glass. Old Joe gripped the steering wheel from the driver's seat, his knuckles white with cold, muttering standard-issue MassDOT profanities. Whatever asshole dumped a pile of scrap metal in the middle of Route 9, slowing down his salt run, was getting plowed along with the snow today. The cab punched straight through the snow fog, maintaining a steady plowing speed of 45 miles per hour, barreling hard at the blockade. Old Joe nudged his elbow back, flipping the toggle for the spreader controls. With a crisp click, the high-speed rotary spinner on the rear of the truck whirred to life, instantly redlining its RPM. The chute door slid open, and the industrial road salt, cut with a high-concentration chemical deicer, flew out along the spinning blades. This wasn't your everyday leisurely road salting. The spinner threw it out with the density of a buckshot volley, blasting right in the face of the 40 wobbly Draco heavy infantrymen and the two paralyzed scout walkers blocking the road. The blizzard scattered the salt mist even wider into a thick, blinding white cloud that even the snowflakes couldn't penetrate. The Draco infantry could barely stand on the black ice as it was, their body heat rapidly bleeding out through their unregulated armor. Seeing the salt mist inbound, they tried to dodge, but the slick ice sent them slipping and sprawling in a chaotic pile-up. Crawling and tumbling, they couldn't escape the overwhelming dragnet of salt. The harsh, briny pellets mixed with ice shards smacked squarely into their pitch-black bio-armor, burrowing into the joint seams. The first grain of high-concentration salt clamped firmly onto the Draco armor's active biomusculature. The tactical hologram on the Draco Empire's orbital command ship instantly exploded into a red fog. 40 infantry life signs began flashing violently, and piercing hypothermia alarms shattered the climate-controlled air of the bridge. Admiral Zorus violently lunged forward, the shock causing his scaled bio-armor to flare out with microscopic fractures. He watched with his own eyes as the white salt mist swept over his ground formation. The split second each grain of highly concentrated industrial salt touched the Draco reactive armor, it erupted into a plume of gray-green smoke. A catastrophic embrittlement reaction spread at a visible rate. The bio-armor, designed to withstand kinetic ballistic impacts, began peeling off like sun-baked, cracked mud, exposing the tender flesh underneath that had zero protection against the extreme cold. The -15-degree wind, packed with ice shards, poured into the breaches, drilling a sickening pain into every nerve ending. The 40 Draco infantrymen instantly lost all semblance of formation. They abandoned their plasma rifles, already frozen into dead weight, clutched their heads and screamed in agony, slipping and crawling across the black ice in a desperate search for cover. On the side of the storm-swept highway, only one tiny building radiated a warm yellow glow. The orange Dunkin sign, swaying in the sub-10-meter visibility of the blizzard, became the sole floating piece of wreckage for these desperate aliens to cling to. The 40 infantrymen, dragging their constantly crumbling armor, pivoted and used every last ounce of their strength to drag themselves toward the light. Dead center on the highway, the two remaining immobile scout walkers had long since suffered total joint lockup. The salt mist seeped through the armor gaps into the exposed hydraulic joints. Wisps of gray-green smoke were already drifting out from the screw threads. They stood there like two paralyzed hunks of dead iron spiked into the iced-over pavement, completely unaware that from the depths of the blizzard to their left and right, the deep, rumbling approach of heavy truck engines was closing in. The 1,000-watt high beams of salt trucks 2 and 3 cleaved through the incoming wall of snow, cutting a steady flanking maneuver along the icy Route 9. They perfectly sealed off any escape route for the two dead in the water scout walkers. Both drivers were 20-year veterans of highway hazard clearing. Nobody panicked. They didn't even tap the brakes. Whatever was blocking the plow line, no matter what it was, had to be cleared. Driver 2, chomping on a half-frozen bacon sandwich, keyed his CB radio and grunted. These two tin cans are hogging a whole damn lane, expecting me to detour. If this makes me late for shift change and my iced coffee, who's spotting my docked pay? Both trucks triggered their spreaders simultaneously. The high-speed rear spinners violently hurled a full half-ton of high-concentration industrial salt mix. The icy salt pellets battered the mech's exposed hydraulic joints like shotgun blasts. The salt instantly penetrated the joint seams. The rubber O-rings, already brittle from the cold, ruptured in seconds. Hydraulic fluid spewed out, instantly freezing into rock-hard yellow chunks the moment it hit the -15-degree air. A deafening metal-on-metal screech overpowered the howling wind. The two powerless walkers violently shuddered a few times before their joints seized permanently, the heavy chassis swaying once before, locking dead in the center of the icy road. The gale slowly dispersed the salt mist. The three salt truck drivers gripped their wheels, staring at the two immobilized walkers, waiting for the cleanup crew. Right then, an even heavier, deeper engine roar battered its way out of the blizzard from behind the two mechs. Blinding high beams gradually split the snow fog, pushing the massive shadows of the two mechs straight down onto the ice ahead of them. The corner of Sully's mouth, clenching his iced coffee straw, didn't even twitch. 34 hours of non-stop plowing had shot his eyes entirely red. His extra-large iced coffee was down to a third, ice shards sticking to the plastic cup, the chill creeping right down his wrist to his elbow. The diesel engine of his 9-ton Ford plow rumbled like a coiled volcano. The tires bit into the black ice without a hint of slipping. He glanced at the dash, 30 miles an hour. Not too fast, not too slow. Just right for clearing trash off the road. The pilot of the second scout walker, its joints locked solid by the road salt, was frantically jerking the joystick in the cockpit. Spiderweb fractures cracked across the brittle armor. The hydraulic legs wouldn't yield a single inch. Sully didn't even lay on the horn. He cranked the wheel hard, and the 9-ton hardened steel plow blade slammed squarely into the midsection of the mech's chassis. The excruciating sound of splintering metal easily drowned out the 70-mile-an-hour winds. The brittle alien armor shattered like a frozen crust of ice. Already unstable, the mech rode the impact right off the right side of the road, carrying half a ton of road salt and shredded armor with it. It tumbled into the 20-foot deep snow ditch by the shoulder, hitting the soft bank with a massive boom, throwing up a geyser of snow that splashed the tops of the pine trees. Salt Truck 1's driver leaned out his window and hollered, his laughter booming over the CB radio. $5. I bet 10 seconds to clear it, and you did it in 8. Pay up. Sully slammed his coffee cup into the holder, shoved the gear shift into drive, and slowly turned the wheel toward the last remaining scout walker, which was pinned next to the concrete Jersey barrier in the center of the road. On the left side of the highway, Salt Truck 2's massive body had finished turning. Its 180-horsepower engine roared so hard the ice vibrated. Its gigantic tires crushed the ice into spiderwebs, and its blinding high beams dead-locked onto the paralyzed mech. Driver 2 spat out the tobacco stem had been chewing half the night and cranked his steering wheel hard left. Using the momentum of the slick black ice, the 12-ton rig barreled down on the mech with a deep rumble. The mech's hydraulics were already corroded and brittle from the salt, frozen into dead knots. Even the turret wouldn't spin. The sickening crunch of metal smashing into concrete sent a cloud of snow into the air. The mech was wedged brutally between the highway's concrete barrier and the salt truck's massive bumper. The cockpit's pressurized canopy cracked open with a pop, instantly letting in a blast of icy wind loaded with salt grit. Inside, The pilot was frantically slapping the console, unable to even pop the hatch. The driver of Salt Truck 3 leaned against his door, looking through binoculars and whistling. The three hunters from the cabin walked over, clutching a wad of $35 in bets, loudly arguing whether the mech would snap in half before 10 seconds were up. Sully parked his 9-ton Ford plow on the shoulder, leaned out the door and took a massive drag of his iced coffee. The rim of the cup, now just a third full, was edged with frost. He counted down deadpan, spitting shards of ice into the snow. 7, 8. Down the highway, the bright orange neon sign of a 24-hour Dunkin swayed blindingly in the 70-mile-per-hour blizzard. The 40 Draco heavy infantrymen, their armor crumbling and their bodies completely stiff, had huddled up against the glass door. A hand, webbed with salt corrosion cracks, clamped onto the freezing door handle. Admiral Zorus ground the sole of his boot into the non-slip deck of the orbital command bridge. The 40 blinking red biosignals on the tactical holo screen were practically burning out his retinas. Blinding alerts pulsed next to every single signal. Bio-armor integrity dropped below 12%. Core temp only 2 degrees above ambient. All thermal weapons offline. The camera feed panned through the squad leader's body cam. The orange Dunkin neon sign jittered violently in the 70-mile-per-hour winds, ready to rip off its mounts. The leader's salt-cracked hand pressed against the freezing glass door handle. 40 Draco heavy infantrymen were crammed under the narrow awning. Massive chunks of their armor sloughed off along the salt-corroded fissures. Every step left a trail of debris. The biting wind tore mercilessly at their exposed flesh. The 40 men shivered so hard together that the entire glass door vibrated with a humming rattle. Someone gritted their teeth and pushed. The glass door whined as it swung inward, letting the negative 15-degree snow slurry blow right into the shop, sweeping past the warm overhead lights. The infantry leader dragged himself forward. The armor on his right knee had completely deteriorated, sending spikes of agony with every movement. He heavily slammed his totally frozen solid plasma rifle onto the shiny tile floor, angling the barrel at the human kid in the uniform behind the counter. His vocal cords were stiff from hypothermia, turning every word he spat into a cloud of white vapor. His tone was a mix of freezing tremors and the last remnants of the Draco Empire's arrogance. Provide maximum-level thermal resupply immediately. We are the conquest force of the Draco Empire. Comply, and you will be rewarded upon imperial occupation. Refuse, and we will level this establishment. Snow spray blew in from the open door, hitting the gray hoodie of Chad, who was wearing a night shift name tag. He had just finished wiping down the espresso machine's milk pitcher. Hearing this, he rolled his eyes so hard they almost flipped into the back of his head. Heater got busted by the storm last week. City hasn't come out to fix it yet. We're out of hot stuff. He jutted his chin, pointing a finger toward a space heater in the corner, tagged with a crumpled red out-of-order sticker. The thing wasn't blowing a breath of air, and a pile of abandoned takeout bags was stacked half a foot high on top of it. Chad set down his rag and yanked open the overflowing stainless steel ice bin under the counter, the crushed ice rattling loudly against the metal. He dug in with a massive scoop, pulling out a heaping mound of crushed ice, and slammed it down into an extra-large paper cup branded with the Dunkin logo. Dark brown iced coffee spilled over the cubes, leaving freezing wet rings on the freshly polished register counter. All 40 Draco heavy infantrymen crammed in the narrow aisle shivered in perfect unison. Their tattered bio-armor kept dropping gray-white flakes of corroded debris. Every step left another pile of dust on the floor. Everyone's shoulders were shaking violently, their teeth chattering like castanets. They had tossed their useless plasma rifles into the snow outside long ago. Now, they were just huddled together trying to save whatever pathetic body heat they had left, their blue-gray eyes completely glued to that cup full of ice. Chad slid the cup across the glass counter, knocking a few pieces of crushed ice off onto the floor. his tone dripping with the lazy impatience of a cashier dealing with a line holdup. Extra large iced coffee, $3.75. It's all we got. Take it or leave it. The Draco infantry leader's right knee revealed frostbitten, purple skin. His half-frozen claw hovered in midair. His fingertips, crusted with industrial salt grit, were less than a half-inch from the freezing wall of the paper cup. The leader's calloused palm grabbed the base of the cup, pulling the dark liquid floating with crushed ice right up to his face. His core temperature had already plummeted past the lethal line. He didn't have the luxury to figure out why this human employee was leaning on the counter yawning with pure apathy at 40 armed invaders, and he definitely didn't have time to run a thermal scan on the liquid. He popped the lid and chugged a massive mouthful right down his throat. The second the sub-zero liquid packed with ice shards hit his stomach, every muscle in the leader's body locked up into a solid block of ice. The Draco thermal regulation system immediately triggered catastrophic shock, hypothermia. His core temp crashed through the safety threshold in seconds. His pupils blew wide open. The fingers gripping the paper cup clamped into rock-hard stone. He tipped straight backward like a felled tree, his head hitting the terrazzo floor with a dull thud. He instantly slipped into a deep, rigid, hypothermic coma. 30,000 kilometers above, on the Draco orbital command ship. The pale blue tactical hologram finally established a clear visual feed from the Vanguard. Admiral Zorus, whose claw was resting on the edge of the console, lunged a foot forward. The blizzard filter faded, and the warm yellow interior of the shop popped up. 39 stripped and shivering heavy infantrymen crammed in an aisle. In the center of the screen, the Vanguard leader was pressing a dead plasma rifle into the chest of the human employee, Chad, demanding thermal resupply. Chad rolled his eyes and slid over an overflowing cup of dark liquid, a half-inch of crushed ice sitting right at the brim. Zorus stared at the screen, watching his Vanguard leader throw his head back and take a massive gulp. The next second, the camera violently pitched over. Frost rapidly bloomed across the bio-armor on the leader's neck. He slammed onto the floor tiles, stiff as a board, his heart rate instantly flatlining. The out-of-control body cam happened to point right at the counter. Chad was leaning against the ice bin, spinning a pen. He didn't even bat an eye. Half his arms were exposed in a short-sleeved shirt, completely unbothered by the ice shards stuck to his hands. Zorus stopped breathing. He had read through every astrobiology archive in the Empire. Absolutely zero carbon-based endothermic organisms would willingly chug sub-zero icy liquids into their stomachs and stand there completely unfazed. In a negative 15-degree blizzard, these humans weren't even wearing thermal armor. They were casually plowing snow on the highway and taking ice drinks as routine rations. A conclusion that made every scale on his body flare up slammed into his brain. These humans absolutely had to possess controllable, internal nuclear fusion organs to stably generate enough heat to offset extreme cold. His vaunted thermal weaponry was fundamentally useless against them. The motion sensor on the bottom left of the hologram suddenly let out a piercing shriek. A 9-ton metallic heat signature, high beams blazing, was tearing down the icy Route 9, barreling at high speed right toward the Dunkin storefront. Carrying the momentum of the blizzard, the 9-ton Ford plow's blade hit the half-buried remains of the wrecked Scout Walker with a massive clang before the tires grabbed the black ice outside the shop and braked solidly. Sully aggressively slurped the last bit of his iced coffee, crunched the ice shards loudly in his teeth, and kicked his door open. 70-mile-an-hour ice shrapnel blasted him in the face. He mumbled a curse, tugged down the brim of his beanie, and yanked the door handle hard to shut it tight. The moment the glass door swung open, the storm blew a fresh load of snow into the shop. The eyes of 39 Draco heavy infantrymen snapped over in unison. This pack of aliens, their armor integrity sitting well below 12%, was huddled by the window booths, violently shivering. Sully was totally deadpan. He stepped right over the rigid corpse of the alien leader in front of the register, his boot crushing a piece of brittle armored debris into the floor with a sharp crunch. He slammed the empty, extra-large cup down onto the counter, making the barcode scanner jump. Chad didn't even look up, still wiping down the espresso machine. Usual. Extra large iced, extra ice. Throw an extra half scoop of ice in there. Wind's blowing hard out there today. Gotta cool down. Sully leaned against the counter, giving the huddled mass of shivering aliens the side eye. He started bitching. These pieces of junk jammed me up for 3 miles. Could have been done, clocked out, and in bed by now, but they dragged my shift out another hour. More annoying than an oak tree blowing down in the middle of the road in autumn. Soon as I down this cup, clearing the rest of the route. Gonna radio those 3 salt trucks to bury those 10 with the busted legs down the road too. Don't want 'em stinking up the place when the snow melts in the spring. Chad dug out a loud heaping scoop of crushed ice and dumped it into the cup, ice shards spilling over the rim onto the counter. This entire conversation, crystal clear and delay-free, transmitted right through the infantry comms directly to the tactical holoscreen on the Draco orbital command ship. The knuckles of Admiral Zorus's claws gripping the command chair had turned an unnatural, sickly pale blue. Every sound from that roadside donut shop rang out clearly on the tactical hologram. That old plow driver Sully's line, "Too much trash outside, blocking the plow route," pierced his skull like a signal spike. 3 hours ago, he fully believed thermal weaponry could turn the highways of this primitive planet into rivers of magma. Now all 3 of his scout walkers were paralyzed in the snow. 50 heavy infantrymen were either crippled and frostbitten or crammed into a tiny shop waiting to die. And his pride and joy, the plasma rifles, were frozen solid and dumped in a snowbank. Their bioarmor was corroded to brittle flakes by cheap industrial road salt, and his vanguard leader just took 1 sip of a humanized coffee and instantly dropped into shock hypothermia. Zorus had studied 40 years of interstellar biology, and every textbook clearly stated that no carbon-based organism could actively ingest a liquid completely full of ice in -15-degree weather and stay upright. Only apex predators equipped with controllable internal nuclear fusion organs could pull that off. These humans weren't the primitive barbarians he had calculated. They were grim reapers hiding in a backwater solar system. His staff officer, face totally ashen, stepped up to ask if they should initiate an orbital bombardment. Zorus slapped him away, his claws nearly ripping through the officer's armor. With trembling fingers, he circled the entire New England region on the star map, painting it a harsh, maximum-level death red. He flagged it as an absolute non-contact anomalous death zone and subsequently marked the entire solar system's transit lanes as maximum evasion. Without a microsecond of hesitation, he slammed his claw down on the emergency warp jump trigger. Klaxons instantly shrieked across the bridge. The warp drive ruthlessly sucked the ship's power reserves dry, making the massive hull groan and vibrate in orbit. The system instantly severed all comm links to the ground forces. A pale blue warp field slowly crawled across the hull. Zorus stared dead at the snow-blurred Route 9 on the screen, not daring to exhale a single breath. Behind the register, the espresso machine hissed out a shot, splashing over the mountain of ice in the cup, sending tiny shards flying onto Sully's salt-caked work boots. The 39 Draco heavy infantrymen huddled in the corner suddenly stiffened. The comm links on their ragged armor sparked to life with static. Admiral Zorus's trembling evacuation order squeezed through the current. The very next second, the orbital warp energy pulse shattered the signal. Every comm link popped with a blue spark, turning completely dead. They looked at each other's crumbling armor, exposing large patches of bruised purple skin. They remembered their useless plasma rifles buried out in the snow. They looked back at the old human driver at the door, casually sipping a cup overflowing with ice. The very last shred of their combat resolve leaked right out of their frozen bones. The few Draco at the front started snapping off their cracked armor plates, backing up against the wall with their hands raised, making their surrender crystal clear. A sharp-eyed alien spotted a stack of promotional fleece blankets sitting by the register, printed with the Dunkin logo, unopened. It was the monthly winter loyalty reward. 39 men scrambled over each other, clawing and fighting to wrap the fleece over their ruined armor. They clustered by the busted space heater, curling into a tight ball. The sound of their teeth chattering was louder than the blizzard outside. Chad rolled his eyes again, slid the topped-off extra-large iced coffee over to Sully, and snatched the 2 crumpled bills slapped on the counter. Sully took a massive drag from the straw, the brain freeze making his temples throb. He shot one last look at the huddled mass of aliens shivering under floral fleece blankets in the corner. "Trash just taking up space," he grumbled. He wrapped his hand around the freezing, wet cup, his boot scraping past the frozen shoulder of the alien leader on the floor. He stepped back through the Dunkin glass doors. The wind chucked 70-mile-per-hour ice shards right at his face, stinging his cheeks. He violently sucked down another hit of iced coffee through the plastic straw, wincing at the bitterness, and pulled out his Ford keys, giving them a jingle. Inside, 39 Draco infantrymen wrapped in promotional fleece shivered violently in the corner. Night shift Chad didn't even look up, wiping down the register, yelling, $2 refill goes on the Mass.tab. tab. Don't forget your coupon next time. Sully waved a hand without looking back, yanked the door open, and climbed up into the cab of the 9-ton plow. He locked the extra-large iced coffee into the cup holder, turned the key, and the diesel engine roared to life, shaking the snow right off the windshield. The thick white exhaust was instantly ripped to shreds by the wind. He dropped it into drive, the heavy blade hitting the pavement with a clang, and slowly rolled forward, hugging the ice. The Scout Walker, locked up by road salt, was leaning against the barrier. A gentle nudge from the plow blade sent it toppling straight into the deep ditch. In less than 10 minutes, the fresh snowfall completely buried the top of the mech's head. The 10 crippled Draco infantrymen on the side of the road were also steadily getting buried by the waist-deep snow, only tiny corners of gray-green armor showing. Very quickly, they became nothing more than smooth snowbanks. The 3 salt trucks were parked on the shoulder, the drivers leaning out their windows waving thermoses. Sully honked the horn twice in acknowledgement and kept rolling. The CB radio blasted the dispatchers, swearing, complaining that the southbound sector was jammed up again. Sully blew out a breath over the mic and grunted, "Route 9 is clear." Just some scrap metal in the way. Took care of it. The wind briefly lifted the snow curtain off the windshield. The flat asphalt stretched endlessly into the heart of the blizzard. A highway sign peeked through the whiteout, Route 9, Boston. Sully took another pull of his icy, slushy coffee, let out a yawn, and stepped on the gas. The 9-ton snowplow thundered over the shiny black ice, rolling forward into the storm.
Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around to the very end. Finishing this story left me with a profound sense of satisfaction, mainly because it perfectly captures the absolute core of what makes the HFY genre so damn fun. We're so used to seeing grand space operas where humanity triumphs by out-engineering the aliens, building bigger dreadnoughts, or wielding unimaginable futuristic tech. But this time, I wanted to strip all of that away. I wanted to focus on the raw, unpolished, and intensely stubborn grit that makes us uniquely human. Sully isn't a genetically modified supersoldier. Hez just a blue-collar guy running on 3 hours of sleep and an extra-large Dunkin iced coffee, desperately trying to finish his shift during a brutal Massachusetts nor'easter. And honestly, that's the beautiful absurdity of our species. Our ultimate weapon isn't a plasma cannon. It's our sheer, spiteful refusal to let the universe inconvenience us. The Draco Empire brought interstellar war and heavy thermal shields, but they forgot to check the local weather report. And more importantly, they completely underestimated a grumpy municipal worker behind the wheel of a 9-ton Ford snowplow. Bringing this piece to life on the collaborative writing workbench has been an absolute blast. It's effectively a love letter to the everyday folks, the night shift workers, the plow drivers, the people who keep the gears turning while the rest of the world is hiding under the covers. It highlights that distinctly human brand of defiance, drinking a freezing ice-filled beverage in sub-zero temperatures simply because we can. I hope Sully's totally unbothered attitude brought you a few laughs and a reminder that sometimes the most badass thing you can do is just treat an apocalyptic alien invasion like another pothole on the road. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.